great session.
Thank you. Well, welcome, guys. Let me actually turn it over to myself here. Now that I'm an organizer. Here we go. Perfect. All right. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. My name is Brian Knight, and let me turn off my Skype there. Excuse me. I thought I already had that off. There we go. Sign out. All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Brian Knight. And today we are going to learn about Skype and how you sign off to Skype. There we go. Today we're going to learn about how we can do data quality inside of SQL Server 2012. Again, my name is Brian Knight. I am my Twitter handle is @BrianKnight. I'm also at bknight at pragmaticworks.com. I'm a SQL Server MVP out of Jacksonville, Florida. And here I actually have a company called Pragmatic Works. You probably know a little about us since you're actually at this webinar. We do BI training, BI consulting, and also a number of products around the BI space as well. I've authored a number of SQL Server books, most of which you can buy at the flea market today. And I blog at a website called bidn.com. That's the BI Developer Network. Now, Chris is also with me today. He'll be co-presenting with me. Chris, you there?
Yes, I am.
Tell us about yourself, Chris.
Sure. I'm a BI consultant with Pragmatic Works. My background is primarily, I come from a developer, software architect background. My focus now is ETL. That's my specialty. I blog on DQS and Master Data Services at BIDN. My email address is cprice@pragmaticworks if you have questions after the session. And you can follow me on Twitter at BlueWaterSQL.
The great thing is if you search for data quality services content, and I was searching for quite a bit of content last night, I kept on coming across Chris's blog over and over and over again. So he's definitely one of the foremost experts in the community on it, and that's why I invited him here to do about a good portion of the demo as well, just so we can really see what he's seeing in the industry and all that. So I appreciate Chris for coming. Now, as part of this also, my HR department actually went ahead and told me to not say a few things. So I'm going to get those things out of my system right now. They told me not to talk about a number of things. So I'll just want to go ahead and get this out of my system. Chris, it goes for you as well. We've had some instances, so let's go and get that out of our system now. All right, there we go. All out. So why is data quality so important? What is data quality? Well, first of all, if you look at it, the barriers of entry into BI, business intelligence, one of the biggest barriers of entry, one of the biggest impediments for SSIS is, for doing any of that, is actually cleansing data and deduping data. So we kind of lump a lot of stuff into data quality. It might be considered duplicate data. It might be considered data that's inconsistent, or data that has FL instead of Florida, or a number of issues like that. Or maybe I have 4 different versions of a customer. So when you think about most systems, and your system in particular, you probably think about, I have an HR system, I might have a project management system, I have an accounting system, and all these different databases that are all throughout my environment. And all those databases might have a slightly different spelling for you or for the customer. So with that said, imagine trying to build a warehouse on that junk data. With a survey that was taken a number of years ago, about 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 2011, from a very popular website, has found that the biggest impediments for somebody opening up a BI project was data quality. Now, we can also see here that one of the biggest barriers of entry, the top barrier of entry for BI is data quality issues. I can't tell you how many projects I found was that, and it's around that. So what we're going to show in this session is how do we do data cleansing inside of data quality services, as well as in SSIS, which is one of the 2 biggest barriers for that. Okay. So also a lot of the issues for people doing master data management. Master data management is when you want to get one version of a customer, and how you get that one version of the customer. Well, one of the biggest barriers of entry for that also is going to be data quality issues as well, where I have 4 different versions of that customer spelled different ways. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. I moved my microphone closer. I apologize for those that found that. And there we go. There we go. So, okay. Answer some questions over there. Now, why should you really, that's one of the reasons why you should care about this. But also, if you're new to data quality, or DQ for short, one of the things you'll see is the market is really expanding. So you're seeing a lot of jobs being open for this type of specialty. And this specialty is so, it's still very short-staffed. It's hard to find people for this. So if you have data quality experience or data cleansing experience in SSIS, you can see a nice burst in your resume and also in your marketability. So we're seeing about a 12%, 13% increase from 2009 to 2011 as far as the market share goes. Now, this is interesting, but you'll notice also down the bottom right that Microsoft is not really considered a player yet in this field. They have just opened up a new type of tool to kind of become that player. And this tool does integrate with SSIS. So if you're an SSIS developer, you're an app developer, you're going to find this tool very, very useful. This is their version 1 tool in the market. So as with most Microsoft version 1 tools, it will have some not will be perfect, but it does get us pretty darn close. Now, how do we do this today? Well, how do we do data quality or data cleansing today is usually going to be done through manual work through Excel. Maybe you have some kind of fuzzy matching with SSIS. You might have some kind of custom code of some sort, .NET code or a store procedure code to do things like Salindex routines. You might also find yourself doing address correction with some kind of third-party component like Melissa data or with our own components as well. One of the cool things, I've got to show this to you, because I saw this the other day and I got so like amazed by this that I had to just show it. This to me was one of the new Excel 13. This has nothing to do with our session, but I just saw this and it had so much to do with data cleansing, even though it's not SSIS or SQL Server, that I just wanted to show you a new feature real quick, a 30-second demo here, about how Excel 13, 2013, will help you with data cleansing in the future. So as you can see, I have a number of email addresses on the right here. And I want to extrapolate data out of this. And one of the ways you can do that is you can build an SSIS package and some script transforms to do it. Or in this case, if I want to pull the first name out, I'll just type in Nancy. I'll hit enter. And as I type in Andrew, look what happens. It recognizes that it has it recognizes my pattern. And if I hit enter, it pops it all the way down. Same thing with full name. There's Nancy Freehaufer. Hit enter, and that's type A. Here it is again. Hit enter, all the way down. If I wanted to do like the domain name, Fourth Coffee, and do .com, I hit enter, and as I type in, there it goes, all the way down. If I just want to get the company name, I can do Fourth Coffee. Oops, coffee. Hit enter, and as I type in, there it goes, all the way down. Now, it's not perfect, but it does a pretty darn good job. Lastly, it does a pattern matching as well. So I can see myself using this to kind of skip the scripting and get data kind of pre-cleansed, and then going to SSIS do some of the cold work in there. So I could do a pattern like, okay, I have a name. Let's see here. I'll call this full name, and I'll do this Nancy Freehaufer, H-A-F-E-R, and I can do company, and that would be Fourth Coffee. And when I hit coffee, there we go, I hit 2 F's. Hit enter, hit Control-E, look at that. All the way down, it's almost working. It's got some it got stylied by the full name there. I think Nancy there for that, so it's putting that there. But overall, it's a great way to kind of pre-cleanse some data. This is just a standard Excel now, Excel 2013. So you can actually download this today for free at Microsoft's website. And it's free until the beta gets out of beta mode. I have found this to be really, really stable. I'm using the beta version right now at work as a production box and have not had any issues yet with it. So the question about what tool is that? Standard Excel 2013. So if you have Excel, you will have that feature in the future, or you can have it today by going to download the beta. So this is one of the ways we can use data quality today is with Excel. Now, how do we fix it in the future? Well, there's a new feature inside of SQL Server called Data Quality Services. It is available in SQL 2012, and that's in BI Edition or Enterprise Edition. Now, we can use this to cleanse data, dedupe data, and we can also integrate this inside of SSIS. So this is a canned tool, and the great thing about this, think about data quality tools, or data quality types of things you've done in the past. Well, in the past, you might have gotten this 50-page diatribe or requirement stock on how to cleanse a customer name. and you go through all the code to fix that. And then the code change, and you replicate that code in a .NET application, you replicate it in an SSIS package, and then over and over and over again on a web page kind of validation, all those places you replicate that code. Well, then the BA changes the rules. Now we want to make sure the field is at least 8 digits long now as well, because we're seeing bad data come in. Well, now you need to go and recode all 4, 5, or 10 applications that use that logic. Now, instead of that, what Data Quality Services gives you the ability to do is it gives the ability for a data steward or a BA to create that rule, not in Word, but instead to create that word in a new data cleansing client. And then the application, whether it be SSIS, whether it be a .NET application or a web page, can all use that rule. And the amazing part is, as the rule changes, as you recognize there's new types of data coming in that we didn't recognize before, we change that rule and republish the rule out. Immediately, SSIS, the web page, and the .NET application can all change as well. So there's some really, really neat things we can do inside this, and this is why Chris is so passionate about it. So what are some of the common data quality issues we can fix by this? Well, one of the common data quality issues is, rather than use things like gender codes, like male, female, and unknown, I might want to use 0, 1, 2, for example. I might notice that there's a number of zip codes that aren't complete, or a number of names that aren't complete, and I want to complete that data source. Maybe I want to tap into some other third-party data source to complete that data. Accuracy issues. So we might have some issues with the viability of that source. And how do we have customers that weren't active 6 years ago, but we're using those customers instead of the active customers. You might also find that you have salaries that are coming in for your intern that are well outside the normal boundary of an intern salary. Maybe it's millions of dollars for an intern salary. So somebody's either hacked the system or they've added a few zeros by accident. And you also might find uniqueness issues. You might see the same John Ryan 5 times because the data originated from 5 different systems. And you want to uniquify that data. That's a word. It is now. Okay. So here's the kind of solution that Microsoft has proposed. And then SSIS becomes a consumer of this. We may want to cleanse the data, which is kind of what I showed you before. We may want to match the data. So as I get new data in, I want to match this against a new primary source. I want to monitor as people change the data rules and profile the data. This is a complete data quality solution. And the great thing is, this is normally hundreds of thousands of dollars if you were to buy this from a third-party component. Now, if you have SQL Server now, you already own this as part of your SQL Server 2012 experience. So an example of data quality that we may want to fix, data cleansing we want to fix, is see the John Smith before? I've got John space Smith. This is how I fix this in Excel, but notice I have male down below, spelled out, and I got M up top. I may want to create some rules around this and fix those rules. For example, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 east, or a test, for example, and not the fully street name. So if we do this, we can send this into a cleansing routine, and out comes what you see below. So the address fully spelled out, the zip code's fully spelled out, we have male and female, we have John Smith fully partitioned out. All these rules can be implemented inside Data Quality Services, some of which require some third-party components in some cases. As far as matching goes, this is really cool in SSIS as well, but what matching can do, this resembles a fuzzy grouping in SSIS. We can pass a stream of duplicate data like we see here, and it will basically cluster that data together. So we can see below, the first 3 rows are really the same row. Now, how does this work inside of Data Quality Services? Well, basically what we do is basically knowledge-driven. We start by importing data and saying, well, what are valid data sets, what are bad data sets? And this has to be a really easy-to-use concept, something so easy that a business analyst can use. I mean, Chris, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think is this a tool that a BA can use? I can see that it has to be more of an advanced BA, perhaps. Definitely data steward, though. What do you think?
Right. The DQS tool, which we'll look at shortly, is actually geared toward a business user as opposed to requiring an IT resource to be able to set that up. And the goal of that is to push this function to your data stewards or your more advanced BAs so that they can own the data and own the management of the data and kind of take that responsibility off of IT.
Yeah, the thing that excites me the most, Chris, about this is not getting that 40-page white paper about how to clean a customer name, for example. So getting that standardized would be a really, really cool thing, I think. So,
right.
The cool thing is also, is we can, no matter what our data source is, after we write that rule, we're going to show a number of matching policies and all those kind of things to keep this question. We're going to show a number. Chris has got a great demo he's going to show, and I'm going to show a demo myself. But after we create the rule, we can send multiple data streams into it. So your rule that you create for what a company name should look like will match no matter if I bring the data from SSIS, or whether I bring it from a web page, or whether it's from an accounting database, or whether it be from a CRM database. All of those are going to go through and be scrubbed the exact same way. Awesome. So how does this process work? Well, basically we want to start with we have a number of databases, and we're going to build a knowledge base on what is good data and what is bad data. We'll show those databases off in a second. There's actually 3 databases that you want to start backing up as part of this product. We also have the ability to integrate things like cloud services into this as well. Things like the Azure Data Marketplace, where I have a list of all the valid countries or all the valid zip codes. Things like Melissa data can integrate with this. There's a number of providers that are being provided for you that can say, this is a valid address, this is an invalid address. This is some zip code that got alleviated. Let me go ahead and look that up against this data source and bring it in. So those are all valid data sources we can bring in. After you do that knowledge base, you keep on improving that knowledge base gradually over time, and then you start integrating this in. It also provides you statistics around, of that rule that you just created, what is good and what is bad. How does your data look against that rule? And you get notifications as data changes as well. So some great reports you get inside this. So what I'm going to show in my example is an end-to-end example of a basic knowledge base. And then Chris is going to dive even deeper into it as well. So my example is going to show you how we create our knowledge base, how we then create our first rules in the knowledge and evaluate our data, and then lastly, how we integrate that with SSIS. Chris then is going to go into some deduplication and more data cleansing and some more spectacular demos. So Chris, hang on there for a second. I'm going to pass this over to you, and we'll skip the slides from this point forward. So let me hop out real quick and go full screen. There we go. Okay, so again, you can go full screen as well and go to meeting as well if you want to by hitting that little full screen button on your side. So if you have trouble seeing the resolution right now, that will get you over. Now, inside of my SQL Server menu, let me close this out real quick. You will see a data quality client. You'll find that under the SQL Server menu there. So this client is really made for your business analyst or whatever. Now, I've already configured this, but after you install Data Quality Server, after you install SQL Server, there's a number of scripts that you'll have to run that will install things like your databases, get permissions, and all those kind of things. You're going to find those databases under Management Studio, and the scripts are actually in your directories as well after you install SQL Server. So that's not out of the box by default. You'll have to actually go through and run this, and there are a number of limitations on these databases. Well, one of the limitations, this actually stores all my common expressions and those kind of things. All my projects are stored here. And staging is designed right here. Now, there's a limitation on this, and this is why we have our staging databases. The databases that can participate with data quality services must be on this server wherever my database is, wherever my data quality service is installed. And that's why we have the staging databases. Chris, how have you found people have got around that limitation?
So one of the ways people get around that limitation are you can set up linked servers if you need to if you absolutely just can't move the staging data over. That's probably the easiest way to get around the limitation. Other than that, you're basically stuck with working with Excel spreadsheets and CSV files and stuff like that. So again, this is targeted toward a business analyst or data steward, so it's not really targeted toward an IT user that maybe has access to the IT environment like a normal developer or some kind of DBA would. So
yeah, and for example, saying he created link servers using our solution to AS400 even. So we can absolutely create those kind of link servers to any of those data sources. That's more of an advanced user, more of a technical steward than a regular BA. The BA wouldn't know how to do that probably in many cases.
Right. You would set those up and then make them available through views in the staging database would probably be the easiest way to do that.
Cool, excellent. And then also a great question here from Geethro, which you're actually an MDS expert also. I'm going to let you, I have an answer for this, but I'll let you answer this. How would you define, what is the difference in MDS and DQS, and how they integrate between each other?
So the difference between the two is MDS is to manage master data. So its whole goal is the management life cycle of that master data. So tracking transactions, controlling access, trying to get you have basically a single organizational view of your master data, whether it's your customer products and so forth. DQS is really a tool to cleanse and dedupe or uniquify data. So they're both tools. You have to integrate them together into a solution. So MDS, you can build business rules into it to ensure your data maintains a certain quality. DQS is a tool that would integrate into the pipeline as you're pulling data into MDS.
As an SSIS kind of piece, right?
Right. You could use SSIS or a number of different options to integrate the two together, but they don't by default come integrated together. You have to do that work. At this point, you have to do that work on your own.
Yeah, the best personal example I have of MDS personally here at Pragmatic Works is if I look at the numbers here, there's about 300 people on the phone right now, and I've actually got probably 5 different records for every customer at Pragmatic Works. I have a record for you in our customer management portal where you watch archives of webinars. I have a record for you in GoToMeeting. I might have a record for you in our accounting database if you're purchasing anything. I have a record for you in our training database perhaps. And they all might have slightly different spellings. So I want the ability with MDS is to change the Geethro's name one time, for example, and move that change to all 5 different subsystems. That's the goal of MDS. That's personal kind of goal with MDS that I really love about it myself. But it is more of a platform, not really a not really a tool that you can turn a key and it works. It is more of a platform you manage inside of the cell. Awesome, thank you, Chris. So let me hop back over here again, and let's create our first knowledge base. So I'm going to create a new knowledge base, and this knowledge base is what your BA would create to basically communicate with other BAs, to communicate with your application, like SSIS, for example. So if I were to create one, I'll call this just training on the G's, training on G. All right, and I can also import them, existing ones as well. So if I'm going from QA to prod, for example, I could just import an existing DQS database from somewhere else and bring it over. So I'm going to call this training on the T. I'll hit next, and I'm going to create a number of domains. And think of a domain as basically a field in your application. Maybe it's one called customer name. And customer name is, I'm going to turn on spell checking, it's going to be English, and you have a whole bunch of options here. Should I output this data to uppercase or lowercase or whatever? Now, this is basically a field that may be shared across 15 different applications. I'm going to create one called phone number as well. Phone number, okay. That'll be a string as well. I'll hit OK. So if I go back to customer name here, I want to bring in some sample data. So as I start to develop these rules, I can bounce this data against those rules and make sure that I'm actually correct that data. So I'll go over here under domain values, and I'm going to, rather than add new values manually, I'm going to hit this import values option right here. And I'm going to import from Excel spreadsheet or from a CSV. Let me turn on zooming so you guys can see a little cleaner here. There we go. I'm going to browse out, and as I look at some data here, I'm going to go into a CSV file, and I'm going to do the vendor.csv. It's a list of vendors I got from a database, and as I import those in, there's no rules being applied right now. Now, this is not going to change my data source in any way. I'm importing this data simply to do validation against. And as I'm kind of scrolling down here, I notice a few things that look very similar here. So, for example, it looks like there's a spelling problem in this record right here, for example. And I could fix that rule right now, but I notice right below it, there is an Associated Bytes Inc. here as well. So I could right-click on these if I had 1 or 8 or 10 records, and I could say, you know what, this is not a good record. They're actually the same record. So let's do a synonym. which means that when you see associated bike, let's replace to ASSC bike. Now, that's not actually the right record. I want people to replace it with a fully qualified one instead. So I'm going to right-click on that and say Set as Leading. Now, by doing that, it's going to push this record, associated bike, as our master record. And we can also change any other type of record as well. I can say, hey, when you see a bike store, let's correct that to something else also. So I can type in my own values here if I wanted to. Substitution rules can be applied. All sorts of good stuff we can do here. But now that we have this data set in here, as a business analyst or a data steward, I can now write rules and use this as your unit tester. So let's go to our domain rules here and see how we create our first rule. Now, as I create this first rule, I'll call this just customer validation, something like that. And now keep in mind, this is the rule name that will get displayed if this thing fails inside of SSIS, for example. So I want to say that this row must be at least, let's call this 7 characters long. And on top of that, I want one more rule as well. And I'm going to say that this rule, it must end with the word inc at the end, INC at the end. So where we go here, looking for the must end with INC. Now notice all the different types of rules we can do. We have regular expressions we can do. We can validate on whether this is a date time or a number or whatever. Now there's loads and loads of stuff we can do. Now that correction I made for this question here, that correction that I made in the knowledge base before between that synonym actually gets saved in the database also. So when it sees that value of ASSC, it's going to replace that with the associates. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can do inside of that. So the value must end with inc. That's fantastic. Now a phone number, okay, apply those rules right down. Now notice as soon as I actually apply the rule, it's letting me know that, look at this, Brian, you had perfect data before. That's because I had no rules. I had 700 correct values. Now after I did that, my incorrect values, my invalid values, went from 0 invalid values to 691 values. Or my correct ones only went to 9 now versus a 700. So I have about a 1% correct rate now. That's not great. So I want to hit yes. Let's go and publish that rule. That's good stuff, huh? All right. Now, on my phone number, I'm going to create one phone number one. And I'm going to say, you know, it must be at least, what, 1, 2, 3, 2. I'll say it must be at least, 8 digits long or so. I am incorrect on that one, but it must be greater than 8 digits long. And on top of that, I want a pattern to be reached here as well. So the pattern of code that I want, okay, the pattern, here we go, is a number of ways of doing pattern matching. You could do regex. I could do something for numeric strings like XXXXX, like that, for social maybe or something like that. But in this case, I'm looking for a number. So I'm looking for something that must be matched like 123-123-123-4. Something like that. It's a valid U.S. phone number in my case. I could also do a lookup service and match it against some service out there on the web. Now, instead of matching this up against valid corporations or billion values, I could say, well, let me run a manual unit test this time. And as a BA, I'm going to say I have 2 rules, right? One was data came in this way, 904-638-1111. All right? The other one I had to come in was something like this, 904-638-1111. Now, one of those is good and one of those is bad. If I hit this refresh button, it's letting me know this is the only valid value. So as a BA now, I can say, all right, my rule has worked. I've tested the rule. I can add some international numbers here and see if those should hopefully fail in my case. And I'm ready to go. This is a good code. When I'm all done, I'll hit the finish button and I'll publish this out. Now, publishing this out now makes it available to other products like SSIS. Now, this is a really simple business rule. Chris will show a more complex business rule where I use combined fields and all those kind of things. Now, if I hop over to SSIS real quick here, I'm going to create a brand new package. Okay, let's create a quick data flow here. I just want to show you how this rule works. Now, Stephen asked the question here, is there any way to create a custom business rule implemented with store procedures? Now, I have not found a way to do that. Chris, have you found a way to do that question here that Stephen's asking?
Not in version 1. So I would expect that as the product matures that more advanced functionality that that includes some sort of outside validation would come along, but nothing that I know of, and not in version 1.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see a lot more in a future release. They have redirected a lot of their team to work on this project. Their best SSIS team members are now on that team. So you're going to see a lot of movement on data quality services in the next release SQL Server. It's a really cool tool, and it's not a coincidence that one of our best guys, Chris, is actually on that tool right now. He thinks there's a lot of value inside of it. So let me bring over a NullADB source real quick. And in that source, I'm going to bring over some vendors that I might have, DEM resellers. There we go. We'll see those resellers right here. And I want to see how good is this reseller. So let me hop back over here again, and I'm going to drag over a new transform in SSIS called the Data Quality Services Transform. Now before I would have done this logic in a script transform, maybe using regex, or I might have done some logic inside of derived column transforms, but chances are this was going to be a script component before. In this case, my business analyst that is logging into this server right here, I've got a server right here called Kiwi, and on that server, they've got a project called Training on the T. And they've got 2 fields, customer name and phone number. All right, if I go to my mappings now, I want to say, all right, I've got a phone number right here, and I also have a business name right there. Now, whether it's a reseller name or a customer's company name or an inventory, a company that you buy from, I want to apply the same rules to all those. For my reseller name, I want to apply the company name rule. And as the phone number, I want to put that against my phone number rule. Notice it's also going to output some new columns here. And those columns will actually show you what the corrected value should be and why it failed the rule. Now, do you also want to see things like the confidence and the reason? There's some reasons we'll come back with on that as well. And do you want to do other things as well? We'll come back to those as well later. All right, so back over here again. As I start to look at the data, I'm just going to send this to a dead end in my case. You've probably seen SSIS at one point. No point in showing you how to do, we don't need to write to a table here to show we can write to a table. So I'm going to drag over a unit all and just kind of dead end the data over there. I'm going to put the data viewer here so we can see what that data looks like. And let's run this. Now, there's some additional stuff happening here. Now, what's happening here is actually writing some of this data to the DQS database, and it is a single-threaded process right now. This task is a single-threaded task. Now, why the DQS server may not be a single-threaded server, this task is. So one way around that, if you want to get some extra parallelization, is you can use a conditional split and split it maybe based on state or some arbitrary thing like a mod routine or something like that. Now, here we go. Look at this. We're seeing some invalid data, some good data, and some bad data. So, for example, right here, we're seeing this row is invalid. I didn't spend any time correcting the row, which we can do as well, but right now we're seeing this is actually an invalid row. There's some data that looks to be new, some that's invalid again. So some of these data looks good, some looks bad. And we can see over here on the right, failed rule, phone numbers. That's a rule I typed in a little bit earlier as well. As we scroll a little farther over, we can see that the values, that's all is correct. So far, so good. And reseller name. Oh, this one failed the rule as well. This is actually some domain values, but it says, we can see this is actually values that are in our knowledge base. But this one actually failed the rule itself, associated bike. So it failed the rule. This one's correct right here, Bikes Inc. So that one looks good. Do we have associated bikes here? Do we see that one here somewhere? I think I must have that value here. Let me sort by, oh, okay, I see the problem is. If I find the originating company name, where did it go? Reseller name source. There we go. If it was corrected, you would see what it's corrected to in this new column here. So this is the column that you'd want to insert into your database, perhaps. Or maybe you write it into a QA database saying, hey, this value needs to be reviewed because something is not right in this value. So as I look at this, I think it was called ASSC, I think. Okay, I'm not seeing it here. I must not be seeing the value. I'll point it to different tables, what's happened here. So if I point to my original table, we would see that Associated Bikes Inc. coming in, the ASSC Bike Inc. coming in, and we would see the word corrected in the status. And it was corrected to the fully spelled out Associated Bikes Inc. also. So great stuff here. So this is a way we can integrate this whole concept into SSIS. And what Chris is going to show now is really more of an advanced way of doing this as well. In some cases, your business analyst wouldn't need SSIS at all. So Chris, are you available now? May I go ahead and hop over to you now?
Sure.
Okay. So Chris, I showed a very simple example. Now your example, the sports team, is really an amazing demo. That's why I actually asked you to come here and kind of play along as well. And so kind of walk us through what you're going to show us today.
Okay. Can you guys see my screen now?
We can, yes.
Okay. So what I'm going to walk through now is I'm actually going to focus more on the cleansing and matching data quality projects that occur within the data quality services client. Before I do that, I want to kind of go over the knowledge base and point out a couple of features of the knowledge base. Now, this knowledge base is available out on my blog, so you're more than welcome to grab the DQS file and import it into your DQS and play around with it and poke and prod it and kind of explore. So I'm going to actually jump into the domain management piece first, and I'm not quite as nifty with Zoom it, so I'll try and hobble along here when required. The thing that I want to point out here is how the composite domains work and then how you can actually build rules off that.
This is the question that Chad has, by the way, as well. So I just want to make sure I bring this up to you while you're talking about this, because it's very apropos right now. Are you able to map DQS to more than one field? So this is the exact example that you were about to show us. So Chad, this is for you.
So there's actually two different concepts here. The first, to answer Chad's question, a domain is during a cleanse, it's a one-to-one mapping. So what they've done to get around that, to stop from having duplicate domains that you have to manage individually, is you have this concept of a linked domain. So I'm able to, for example, if I had multiple states, maybe a billing and shipping state, but I only wanted to manage a single state domain, you can create what's called a linked domain. And what a linked domain does is it basically creates a copy of the domain, but you are only managing a single domain. So you can manage that domain and then have multiple copies of it for mapping purposes, and that gets you around that of having the one-to-one mapping during a cleanse routine. A composite domain is a little bit different. So a composite domain, what it does is it allows us to define multiple individual domains that on their own you don't have enough context to cleanse or validate. So in the case of the sports team domain, I've linked together 4 of the domains. So team name, state, league, and stadium capacity. The reason I've done that is there's some overlap. This knowledge base contains baseball, MLB, and NFL teams. As you know, there's some overlap there. So we have a San Francisco Giants. We also have a New York Giants. So if we got a team name of Giants, we don't have enough information just to validate that as a valid team name. So we would need both either a state or a league in order to validate that it's a valid team name. The same for stadium capacity. Stadium capacity on its own, you can't really validate that. Baseball stadiums are generally smaller than football stadiums, so we need to have some context in order to validate that domain. So a composite domain allows us to bring those domains together in order to validate them. And we can look at some of the rules I've set up for that before we jump into cleansing and matching. You'll see I've set up a couple rules. The rules that I have here are to validate a baseball stadium and football stadium size. And you'll see that I'm using 2 different domains to build the rules. So these are all if-then rules. You see on the screen here, if the league is MLB, then I'm actually validating the size of the stadium capacity is between 30,000 and 60,000. The NFL rule is the exact same thing, only bigger. So it's between 60 and 100,000. Another unique thing I can do here is on my Giants rule. So we have a rule here that I'm looking at 2 different domains. I'm actually looking at the league and the team name. So if the league is NFL and team is Giants, I'm actually going to reset the value. I'm going to change the team name value to New York Giants. So I'm able to do a couple different things when I build these rules. I can check a value. I can also update a value as well. Let me jump out of the domain management before we look at some demos. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to go into the matching policy for the sports team. So matching in DQS is rule-based, and what that means is that we have to define rules on what a match is. I have two rules that I've defined here to determine what a match would be in this knowledge base. This first rule, I'm matching on league and team name. So the rules are fairly easy to create. I'm basically saying the league has to be an exact match, and that makes it a prerequisite. So if the league isn't an exact match, the rest of the rule isn't evaluated. The team name must be similar, and because it's the only rule that's similar, it defaults to this minimum matching score of 80% using the fuzzy logic on the inside of DQS. So if the league is an exact match and team name is within a relevancy score of 80, then it'll basically determine that two records are a match.
Can you tell me, what do we mean relevancy score there? What does that mean?
It's a score that's calculated within DQS. If you've worked with the fuzzy matching in SSIS, it's similar to that. It's obviously not exactly the same, but it's the same principle in how it identifies similarity between two records.
Very cool. Okay.
The team state is again similar. I basically am using the state and team name. I'm doing a similar match on both. I've weighted them so that state counts for 25% and team name counts for 75%. When you add those similarities together, the matching score has to be 80. You can test these rules. This is part of the knowledge base management. So this is something your data steward would likely be responsible for. This isn't something that every business user that's using DQS would necessarily do. So I can define a rule, and then I can actually test it, and it's going to run against the data that I set up when I started defining matching rules, and I can see how these rules play out. So I have the ability to test these rules before I actually publish it out to the world. So with that, we'll jump over to the data quality projects, which is this middle section here. This middle section, and there's a lot that's in this middle section that's not available anywhere else at this point in DQS. So matching in DQS is, at this point, limited to the MDS Excel add-in and this data quality project. So these projects are unique in that they don't ever modify source data, which is why you have that DQS staging. So the methodology is you import the data from a source, DQS does its work, and then you export it out, whether it's to a text file, a CSV, or back into a SQL Server database.
Hey, Chris, I'm sorry, I've got a number of questions here. Can you kind of redefine what the overlapping clusters mean? We have about 4 questions that happened right at the same time you said that. Can you kind of tell us more about that?
Sure. I'm actually going to talk about clusters when I go into into the matching project demo. So if we can just hold off on that, I'll explain what the different clusters are. The first project I'm going to run through, and you guys have seen how the cleansing works, so I'm going to run through this rather quickly. We define a new data quality project, and I'm just going to name it cleansing. We select our knowledge base, which in this case is sports team. We're doing a cleansing. You have 2 different activities down here. These are only active if the knowledge base is set up for it. So because we have a matching policy, we can select either activity. So we're going to select cleansing. You get a preview of your knowledge base. You can see the domains. You'll see our composite domain, which has the other domains that are part of it. And then we can actually see our matching policy rules that exist. All right, so we have our source here. You notice, again, we have 2 data sources we can select from. I'm actually just going to go from an Excel file. We've already talked about the limitations. I have a bad data spreadsheet, and I just need to do some quick mapping here where I'm going to map the columns in the spreadsheet to the domains. And it'll just take me a moment to do that. And once we have all the domains mapped, you'll notice that this View Select Composite domain becomes active. So by default, it's going to use the composite domain if all the child domains are mapped. If we didn't want to use it for the purpose of the cleansing, which would disable the rules that are associated with that composite domain, we can uncheck it. But we actually want to use those rules, so we're going to leave that checked. When we click Next, you'll see that we have the profiler that's available that's going to tell us what's going on. And we'll actually start this. What's happening is it's sucking the data from the Excel spreadsheet. It's packaging it up. It's batching it over to the DQS server where it's doing the processing. And then it's returning those results to the client, which in this case is the DQS projects database. So you'll see we had 67 records. The profiler gives us some ideas about what's going on. When we go to manage and view results, that's where we're going to get more detail. So let's jump straight to the sports team composite domain. You'll see that we've got some suggested corrections here. It'll tell us why the correction, it suggested the correction. In this case, DQS cleansed the league. We can actually view the raw record. We have the ability to approve or reject these, and again, this is the idea of a project. So this would maybe be a BA or your data steward would actually be going through and cleansing a data set. So we would actually go through and approve or reject each of these changes. In this case, I'm just going to approve all. And you'll notice that it goes from 4 to 0 here, and the corrected number changed over here. On the invalid tab, we can actually see that we have a couple records that were invalid, both for our stadium size rules. I can actually correct these in place, and unfortunately, we can actually correct them, correct 2. And I can correct these 2 values that are correct. So it looks like we had an extra 1 added on the stadium size up here, so I can change this to 77,000, and I can approve it. And then I can do the same here. It looks like we had a 0 truncated off that, and I can correct that and approve it. And then we're good. We've corrected all our errors. Our data set's clean, and we're ready to export it. When I click Next, you'll see we have a couple options for export, whether we're exporting to a CSV file, Excel. Just to make things easy, I'll export to a CSV file. I can standardize the output, and what the standardized output does is when you've configured your domains and you made those selections as far as forcing things to uppercase or lowercase or correct case, I can actually enable or disable that. I can also have the option of whether I'm exporting data only or data and cleansing info. So if I needed to do some additional work, I can export the cleansing info. In this case, I'll go ahead and do that just so I can show you what that data looks like. Once I've exported that, it's done. I can jump over here to my temp directory. And this is what the output looks like. So you'll notice we get 4 columns, or 5 columns for each column that's in our set of data. And I'm going to try and use Zoom it here. We're going to see how this works. So we get the source column, the output column, the reason that DQS found, whether it was a domain value, whether it's invalid, whether it's new or unknown, a confidence, which you'll notice we have an unknown reason, so our team status is new. So we get those for each columns, and we can process those as necessary if we needed to do some additional processing. So that's a cleansing project in about 3 or 4 minutes. The matching project is where I'm going to spend most of the time because, again, this is one of the few places that matching in DQS is available at this point. So again, we're going to jump to a new data quality project. We're going to select our sports team, and we'll just name it matching. This time I'm going to select the activity as matching. Again, you have the same, we can review our knowledge base. We'll click Next. We'll use Excel file again, and this time I've got a spreadsheet here that I've specifically set up for matching. Now the general process to ensure your best quality matching is we should cleanse this file first. We should run through a cleanse routine so that our data standardized, it's correct, because that gives us the highest probability for matches. I didn't do that with this file. I wanted to kind of exaggerate the matching ability. So you'll notice some misspellings and stuff like that, but generally all that stuff you'd want to correct to have the best possible cases for matches. So you'll notice that it does some of the work for us here. It matches our source columns to our domain names. Again, we're not worried about a composite domain because we're doing matching rules at this point. So we'll click Next. You'll notice the workflow is the same for both the cleansing and matching project as well as other things within DQS. So knowledge discovery, when you're doing domain management, any of those activities. Again, this is targeted toward a user and not necessarily an IT person, so they want the usability of it to be very easy and the learning curve to be very low. So this is where I'll kind of introduce clusters. The first cluster, and I'll go ahead and start this so I can illustrate it. There's two types of clusters that we have available in the matching, overlapping and non-overlapping. Essentially what that boils down to is when DQS is building matching groups, is a similar word for a cluster. Overlapping basically means that a single record can participate in multiple clusters. So what I'll do to illustrate this is let's go to the bottom of this set and let me zoom in. Let's find one, 16022. So this record right here, we'll look at 10063. So we notice that that's participating in this cluster here, which is identified by 10662. Well, also, this same record is participating. Let me scroll back up. And I may have picked a bad record here. Right here. Nope. All right. It's participating in this cluster here that's identified by 29. So essentially, the same record can participate in multiple clusters when we're using overlapping clusters. Now, if we change that to non-overlapping, then it's exact inverse. It's basically one record can participate in one cluster. So we went from 6 clusters before to, I think, 2 clusters. So we've reduced the number of clusters because we're not allowing records to participate in more than one cluster. So that's what is happening with the overlapping versus the non-overlapping clusters.
Hey, Chris, can we use non-SQL Server data sources for this, or does it have to be like SQL Server or Excel?
Well, again, you have the same limitation. You can identify, if you set up linked servers, you can pull in data from whatever sources you wanted to.
Good deal.
Yep. So the work process for this matching is, again, this is just proposing matches to the business user that's using the tool. So they have the ability to reject these matches, which would show up in the ultimate extract. They can also, we've got some color boxes over here. If we bring up our matching rules down here, you'll see it's color-coded to tell them what rules it matched on. They can actually even see a preview of the rule, so we know why DQS grouped these rules together. We have that same profiler, which kind of gives us some information about the set of data. And then it gives us some statistics as far as the matching results. So we can see that basically 16.4% of our set is duplicate data, or we were able to group together.
And this is kind of a black box too, right? As far as how it shows the clusters?
Right. It's black box. You'll see we have some control over how it builds out the survivor record. And let me go ahead and jump to that step since we're running out of time here. So on the export, we have 2 different exports. We can export a match result as well as a survivor result. The survivorship, you can choose how you want to pick a survivor, pivot record. We can do most complete and longest, most complete or longest record. It's very arbitrary because if DQS determines there's a tie for like the most complete record, it randomly picks a record. So you don't have any control over that, and I would expect some of that to be refined in later versions. I've already exported both of these just to show you what they look like. So the matching is, it literally shows us everything. It shows us our clusters. It shows us what records participated in the cluster, the status if they were approved or rejected, and that I used the pivot to determine what the matching records were. The same for the survivor. The survivor is just a single set of data, so it ignores all the duplicates and gives us just a single set of data. So that's basically the cleansing and matching in a nutshell. And I will pass it back over to Brian.
Great. Well, Chris, hang on there. We have a number of questions here, so let's kind of stay off a second, if you don't mind. Great job. So a question from Charlene, which I thought was really just a kind of clarification question. How would you, matching is basically a check, but it's actually cleanse the data. Is that correct?
Right. Right. So matching is strictly the deduplication of data. So, and that's why, as best practice, you always want to match on a clean set of data.
Awesome. Let's see here. How do I? So this is an interesting one for Geetha. How do I stop the match to compare against itself? I'm not sure what Geetha's referring to there. Some of the clusters match against the KB itself and not against what is fed at match. Okay, so I'm not really sure what Geetha's referring to. Do you have any idea there?
Yeah, it shouldn't. It's not going to match against anything in the knowledge base itself. So the match works only on a set of data that you're loading into to be matched. So the match rules are defined in the knowledge base, but that's the limit of the extent the matching the knowledge base does. Now, obviously, there's some other stuff that goes on under the covers, but it's not matching against any of the domain values to determine if there's duplicates in that regard.
Now, you have a development background, Chris. Have you tried integrating with this yet from a .NET app?
I don't think there's an API available at this point.
Yeah,
so,
there's an API that's not really well published yet, unfortunately. So it is SSIS the best place of entry for it right now. Unfortunately, SSIS does not have the matching piece that Chris was referring to a little bit earlier, that I've seen at least. But it's for that you have to use like fuzzy grouping and those kind of components. But as far as the APIs, you're going to find a lot more APIs as they iterate this product. The goal of it is to make it where you can use it from any application that you like.
Right, and I would certainly expect that. I mean, there's already some integration between MDS. You can do the matching if you're working with the MDS add-in, Excel add-in. You can actually match from Excel. That's obviously dependent on MDS at this point, but I would expect that coming at some point. Right.
Well, Chris, I want to thank you for speaking with me today as well. A question here from the last question today: is there any training material on that? Chris has a load of blogs at bidn.com. It's bidevelopernetwork.com. You can also, the product team has a number of them as well, and training videos that were pretty darn good, as I saw last night. I'm gonna put this in your chat window now, and you will see a list of that. So one of the websites was bidn.com. It's a BI Developer Network, and from that you'll see Chris's link. And also in your chat window is a link to the Microsoft's blogs, where they have a list of videos, about 5 videos from a day class they gave, and they give all that away, as well as all the slide decks that I was using here is also free. So Chris, thank you again for coming today, and thank you guys for attending the session here on data cleansing inside of SQL Server 2012. Have a great day, and thank you for attending this session. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Oh, so Alam, it's in your chat window right now, the URL. So you go to meeting chat panel. If not, there it is as well. It's blogs.bidn.com, and you'll see it there. It's in your chat window. And go to meeting.
Hey, Brian, and just as a reminder, our sessions are recorded. Everyone out there in the audience, if you want to go back and review this webinar, it's recorded and will be made available by the end of the week. Go to Pragmatic Works, go to webinars, and you can find all of our past webinars listed.
And it's in your chat window right now. Sorry, guys, I did a chat window just to the organizers before. So check in your chat window now. You'll see the link, and the other link was Chris's blog at bids.com. All right, thanks, guys.
All right, bye-bye.
The organizer has ended the session.